Okay, uh, what we're doing tonight, because it is night for me anyway, I'm sitting in my room talking to whoever. I don't know if anybody. Um, I can't ask you, can you hear me? But I checked my microphone and the computer says somebody can hear me. Don't need to ask, can I hear you? Because you're not there, or at least not right now. So if you recall on Tuesday, or if you weren't there on Tuesday, the first section of approximately an hour of lecture uh, didn't have any ability for me to uh, communicate really with the class. I could hear them, but no, they could hear me, but I couldn't hear them. So we really didn't know what was going on. Plus, I didn't record it. I recorded the second half, and that's posted for you. But right now, what I'm doing tonight, instead of whatever else I could be doing, is I'm recording by myself the first half of Tuesday's lecture, and I will post it for you. Okay, and of course, it won't be word for word the same, but the content will be the same. Okay, we'll actually go a little faster because there won't be anybody asking me questions, and there won't be any pre-talk like I usually do with the people who get there early. I want to show you week 11. Uh, week 11 has the first material that you're going to need for the next lecture exam, which is a week from Thursday. Thursday is tomorrow right now. This is the 5th on that, and Thursday is tomorrow, then a week from that. Uh, on the 13th, you'll have the lecture exam. The first material is embedded here in week 11. It's integumentary system. And then we pass by P3 checklist. Well, we don't need that anymore. We've already had that lecture and that examination. Uh, we know things overlap, and I think we've grown to get accustomed to that. I'm going to put it up here, and here's our integumentary system. Okay, moving down, there's nothing else in that week that you're going to need. In week 12, the first thing you're going to need is nervous. No, I'm sorry. I should back up and start over, but if I do that, I'm going to be here till 3 o'clock in the morning, and you and I don't need that. So, yes, you'll use the integumentary system, but coming down, the lecture on nervous tissue is going to be on L3. So you need that nervous tissue lecture. There are 3 nervous system lectures. This is the first one. In the next week, we have the autonomic nervous system, and that's the second one that you're going to need. All the other material in week 12 here, there's 4 other things, 2 above and 2 below, uh, not to worry about. We've either passed them by already uh, and don't need their content until possibly the final examination. We don't need it for L3. Okay, so please take a look at that in your reviewing. Week 13 has the spinal nerves and the autonomic nervous system. Definitely got to look at that. That's got some diagrams in it, and those diagrams are sure to pop up on the L3 exam. L3 is not a bunch of images and pointers and stuff like that. That's for the practicals. L3 is like the other 2 lecture exams that you had, mostly text and maybe a pencil drawing of sorts. Yes, there was the image of the different types of muscle embedded in one of those tests, but I don't expect that to happen this time. Basically, this is the third of the nervous system lectures. Now, I have gone over these lectures, the three that I mentioned, once and then once again. But if you still have individual questions, email them to me, or better yet, at the start of the session tomorrow or next week, ask in front of everybody, because there's going to be somebody else who doesn't know either. You can help them out. Move down. Practicum 4. We'll be working on Practicum 4 in the organ systems. This is the handout that I gave you. And if you don't have it, didn't save it, just it's on the computer here. You can take a quick look. Okay, all it does is outline the structures that at least will be on P4. Notice there's respiratory system questions embedded here. Okay. This is not complete as far or inclusive for P4. So what is conclusive or inclusive? The material that we've gone over and will go over again before we get that far along. First things first, the lecture test. Lecture test utilizes tissues, part 1. This will also be used in P4, and it will also be used in the final exam. So as you're studying these tissues, you're actually studying for 3 tests at once. If you fail to study, that wouldn't be smart, because you're going to not study for 3 tests at once. Okay. The next item is the study guide. You've seen it. Okay, we've gone over this before. What I need from you really is to put a function, if an F, or a definition, if it has a D, across from each of the different tissue types, or in some cases, organs, like for instance, the liver. Okay? You can disregard the columns that are headed slide and text page. Use the text page column if you wish, so that you can go back quickly to an item that you're looking at. This needs to be turned in along with all of the chapters through chapter 5. Chapter 5 is the last. You need to have the chapters in, please. And this. Now this, some people scan it, okay? That's nice. I wouldn't buy a printer without a scanner on it. But if you don't have that ability, don't worry. Don't go off to Staples or someplace like that and get it done. Just take a photograph using your phone and email it to me, okay? Showing that you have these answers. I don't care if it's fuzzy. I don't care if it's upside down. I don't care at all. I just want to see that you did it. It's going to be very important to your performance on the remaining 3 exams to know these items. So please don't let yourself down. Okay, we're back here again. Here is the study guide. There's recordings for everything except for last Tuesday, the first hour. And that's what we're doing right now, or I'm doing right now. I wonder if anybody is ever going to be listening to this. Well, we'll find out. Here's tissues part 2. Definitely study that, please, for L3. Study it for the final. Study it for the practicum. Everything you learn here will be on all those tests. The endocrine system is the first thing I really went over on Tuesday, and it did not get recorded. I didn't do the entire endocrine system because I had done it before, but I had stopped after the pituitary gland, And so I needed to continue on. You know how it is when things go wrong, they really go wrong. Uh, well, this anything that's wrong, but undesirable for me, uh, that I have to do this endocrine talk at all again. I do need to, of course, but and that's my fault. But this is my least favorite lecture in the course. Okay, so just a quick review. Uh, be sure you know what a hormone is. Okay, we talked about that. Substance produced in one spot of the body, transported by the circulatory system, if you want to insert that, to the entire body, where it'll perform some function or functions when it reaches the target organ. The target organ is the organ affected by the hormone. Okay. These characteristics of the hormone, be sure you know those. They're simple, uh, but nothing's simple if you're not prepared for it. So please just go over that. The endocrine gland, hormone, and target organs are listed. Together, we went over the neural hypothesis and its production of ADH and oxytocin and their functions. Not going to do that again uh, because you got it or you got it on film if you want to look at it. And you got it here also. You're really doing both a synchronous class and an asynchronous class. Synchronous because I'm here talking, hopefully sometimes with you. Okay? And asynchronous because you have this that you can refer to all the time without my being present. So the pituitary gland consists of these two parts, neural hypophysis, adenohypophysis, and the sum total of the hormones that are produced goes down until we reach MSH. Okay, so I'm going to consider that that was done. And if you need to know where, because you don't know where it was done, give me an email and I'll clue you in. The next endocrine gland is the thyroid. You all know where your thyroid is approximately anyway, mid throat, and it extends from both sides. It produces two hormones. Thyroid hormone, nice name, easy to remember, and that increases the basic metabolic rate throughout the body. It is very important in development. If you have a deficiency of thyroid hormone in your development, you're going to end up quite small with malformed appendages, and we don't want to see that. The proper amount, you're fine. Calcitonin. Calcitonin regulates calcium metabolism, as the name says, in young individuals. Calcitonin is important in the development of bone. Hang on to that notion for just a second. There are 4 parathyroid uh, endocrine glands, 4 parathyroids, 2 on each side of the throat embedded in the thyroid gland. We have a picture of it. Okay. So there are a total of 4 parathyroids, and they produce parathyroid hormone. Not a difficult one to remember. Please remember the abbreviation, though, as well. And parathyroid hormone acts counter to calcitonin in regulating calcium metabolism and bone formation. You can go too far one way or not far enough one way, but if you've got a tug of war going, these two, uh, parathyroid hormone and calcitonin, work opposite each other to have an equilibrium. The pancreas. The pancreas, very important, produces 2 hormones, insulin and glucagon. Insulin stimulates the absorption of sugar into the tissues from the blood. So you had a meal or something, and you've got had a potato or something, and it's broken down to sugars in the blood. Those sugars are needed by all of the various tissues of the body, especially the brain. The brain will not work on anything at all except glucose, a specific type of sugar. Okay, so you've got to have sugar uh, in the uh, in the tissues. You don't want too much sugar in the tissues, though. If you drain the blood of sugar because you move it into the tissues, then there won't be any sugar left for the brain, and you will be out cold, maybe forever. So uh, you need again some regulation of how much insulin and how the effects are. If the effects are exaggerated, you got to bring it back down. And the uh, counter to insulin is glucagon. Glucagon stimulates the conversion of a substance called glycogen in the liver to sugar and causes the release of sugar into the blood. Insulin takes sugar and puts it into the tissues. Glucagon essentially turns it around and sweetens the blood instead. At night, when you're less active, possibly not everybody, but uh, at night and being not doing too much, you may not need all the sugar that's moving around in your circulatory system, especially if you ate late. Okay? So this sugar, if there's too much, is going to be stored. We can't get rid of it very easily, except to metabolize it. So the sugar is stored, and glucagon is responsible for storing it, causing the sugar to form into an inert, means non-active, storage product called glycogen. And the glycogen is held in your liver overnight. Okay. Then, in the morning, when you get active again, or anytime you get active again, the glycogen becomes glucose again and enters back into the bloodstream because now that you're active, all of your tissues are going to need it once again. Okay. Caffeine. Caffeine stimulates glycogen conversion back to glucose. That's one reason that a cup of coffee, real coffee, not decaf, real cup of coffee can perk you up at least temporarily in the morning or at any time for that matter. Okay. I asked the class on Tuesday to make a note of this, and so I'm going to ask you to make a note as well. If you don't have a pencil or a pen, then a good idea is pause the recording right now and come back when you do have the pencil or pen. Now, I'm going to assume that you now have a pencil or a pen. Okay. Insulin and glucagon are located in the pancreas in what are called islets of Langerhans. I'll have pictures of those on the second installment of the video, because that's where we covered it on Tuesday. Insulin and glucagon are produced in the islets of Langerhans. A specific type of cell produces insulin. Insulin is produced by beta cells. Usually it's abbreviated just with a large B. Glucagon in the same islet, okay, the same little vesicle inside of the pancreas. Glucagon is produced by alpha cells. It almost may seem just like academic. Okay, beta cells, alpha cells, we don't really know what they are. I agree. I agree. But you're going to read in the books whether it's our book or in the next class or whatever, they're going to say it, and they're going to assume that everybody knows, and yet you know what? Nobody does. But you need to act like you know too. So insulin is the produced by beta cells, and glucagon by alpha cells. Now, I said these are embedded in the islets of Langerhans, and that these are in the pancreas. But what's around them? All around them are the pancreatic acinar cells, ACINAR. Pancreatic acinar cells produce pancreatic amylase. The pancreas is not only an endocrine gland, it's an exocrine gland with ducts and is part of the digestive system as an accessory organ. I'm going to get us a picture real quick. Do it here. I'm typing in pancreas histology. Always want to add the word histology to any of your searches. And then I'll just go for images. And I want to just pick one that looks decent. Just this one over here. You see two more clear areas. They're not clear, but they're lighter. Those are islets of Langerhans. Okay. Islets of Langerhans. The small cells inside of the nuclei, and they're alpha and beta cells. It is possible to stain them differentially so that you can tell which one's which. Okay, but we're not going there. The cells around in which the islet of Langerhans are embedded, these are the acinar cells, pancreatic acinar cells. They produce pancreatic amylase. Okay. The adrenal glands are known for producing two things in particular: steroids, or you can use a long name, corticosteroids or mineralocorticosteroids. Steroids is good enough. Okay. The two most famous steroids are produced by the adrenal cortex. The kidney has a cortex in the medulla. The adrenal gland that sits on top of each kidney also has a cortex in the medulla. The adrenal cortex produces steroids, and the two that are most important are cortisone. It's not written here, so use that pencil. Cortisone, and it's not written here, aldosterone, ALDOSTERONE. Okay. Cortisone is important, of course, in pain relief, and aldosterone is very important in the reuptake of water in the kidney. In other words, so the kidney does not expel all the water out of your body, but retains quite a bit of it. Okay. The adrenal medulla, the center part of the adrenal gland, produces epinephrine. You may call this epinephrine norepinephrine, noradrenaline, or most people will call it adrenaline. There are differences between those substances, but they all have the same effect. And calling them as a group adrenalins or epinephrines, please know this word because I do have it here. These are all necessary for the fight or flight syndrome. They stimulate the sympathetic nervous system and prime the body. The ovaries are both a sex organ and an endocrine organ. So they're an organ of the reproductive system and an organ of the endocrine system. For the reproductive system, they produce ova. But this chart that we're looking at right now is for the endocrine system. So let's see what it produces. It produces estrogen from the ovaries. This estrogen is produced by the developing follicles, and progesterone. Okay. Progesterone is produced by the corpus luteum. Both are produced in greater amounts if pregnancy occurs. If pregnancy does occur, you don't really want another cycle to evolve and release another ovum. You don't need one kid after another every month. So it will essentially feed back. The estrogen will feed back. Progesterone will feed back to the anterior pituitary and limit the production of follicle stimulating hormone, FSH. That essentially cuts off the development of other ova until such time as the fetus could be lost or birth has been given and you want to start the cycle up again, then the estrogen and the progesterone back off. And the FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, starts the cycle again. In the testes, it's both an endocrine organ and it's a reproductive organ, producing spermatids. As an endocrine organ, the testes produce testosterone. There is so much going on with testosterone these days. Every time you turn the television channel, and especially if you're on the computer, these ads are popping up all over the place that you're not a real man unless you're taking extra testosterone. Well, if we have to take extra testosterone, I guess there are no real men to begin with. Okay. How do we get this far? Okay, but it does maintain secondary sex characteristics such as beard and lower voice. The pineal body or the pineal gland, both are correct, secretes melatonin, and melatonin is responsible for regulating what we call the circadian cycle or circadian rhythm, and this prepares the body for sleep. Some people use it when they go on a long trip, so then when they come back and they have jet lag, terrible jet lag sometimes, they can go to sleep when they think they're supposed to try to get back on track. It's a chart below for you if you need it. I actually think you probably don't need this chart, but take a look at it to show where these endocrine glands are in relationship to some things that are not endocrine glands, like the heart, the liver, the stomach, the kidney itself, and small intestine. The thymus is mentioned here, and it's not on my chart, but I do mention it somewhere in our uh, recordings, and I'll mention it again right now. The thymus gland is responsible in a young person, I mean an infant, or maybe a 1-year-old or two at the most. The thymus is responsible for maturing a type of white blood cell called a T cell that's very much responsible for attacking pathogens or anything else that may attack the body. Okay. Young people may still have this, but it would be rare to unheard of for you to still have yours. Okay? It just uh, disintegrates. Okay. That was endocrine system. Here's the recording way back at the 22nd that referred to that. Uh, The practice quiz for the nervous system, practice quiz on tissues, almost every one of you took it, okay, because that was the key to being able to take that other small bonus quiz. The small bonus quiz that I had for you last week on not this Tuesday, not yesterday, but the time before. That was worth a possible 5 points. I do have a record of that. I know you do too. Where are you going to see those points? You're going to see them added onto, if you have any, you're going to see them added onto L3. Okay. So you'll be able to go and see your score on L3 on Canvas. You can do one at a time. Please do not look at your entire score on Canvas. It's not going to work out. But you can see what you did on a test, and say you got an 88 and you had 4 points on that bonus quiz. Well, add the 4 points, and that was a quiz on endocrine, by the way. 4 to the 88, and you're up to 92. Discussion, no discussion. Okay, no assignment. The final assignment to be turned in is chapter 5. A lot of you still have that yet to do. Okay, you need to have chapter 5 turned in, and along with it could be at a different time, but along with it, you need to have that study guide that I told you could photograph. You need those two things in, and your 5 points on P4 is assured. Okay, there won't be any special questions. The complete list of terms is here. I've moved it down because it's more important to us to see here. I know you are familiar with this. The color coding was to indicate which terms were on the first, second, and then finally yellow, the exam coming up. This refers to primarily the lecture exams. This is something you want to be sure that you know, if not every one of these terms, then all but a few. Okay, you don't have to write out a definition you know on a multiple choice test, but you have to be able to recognize a definition that I give you for the term that's being asked. These are all terms that we used in the class. They're all terms that are in the text material for the class. Okay. The organs, part 2, and the organ system. This is actually part 1 here. Let's make that clear. Give me just a second. Okay, here's part 1, here's part 2. Includes material for L3 and P4. As I said, as you're studying for anything from here on out, you're studying for all the tests at once. Okay. Yes, there are some questions that are obviously going to be on the practicum and not on the lecture test, but your knowledge of these things really is going to overlap. Now, additional models for P4. Okay. The other day was last Thursday. I showed you this, but it didn't have labels. So I went and labeled everything. Okay, so it should be more valuable to you now. Please take a look at this. This is an ovary. Here's a large follicle. Here it's called a mature follicle. It's fine. It's a Graafian follicle as well. It produces an ovum or egg, unlabeled, but here's the egg being expelled right up here. Once this lets the egg loose, it will deflate, as you see over here. And then over here, it's not moving around. There are just more than one of these, maybe some left over from previous cycles. This forms the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum is responsible for producing progesterone, the follicle for producing estrogen. Okay. Once the ovum is released, it's either going to be lost, didn't function, wasn't used, or it's could lead to a pregnancy and then childbirth, and then we don't have it anymore. When those things happen, the progesterone stops being produced and the estrogen stops being produced. Okay? The FSH from the pituitary gland takes over and stimulates another follicle over here or here to begin to develop and repeats the cycle. Here's a kidney, blurry shot, got better. And here's a ureter. This is the vena cava. In the respiratory system, again, okay, you need to know this model. This is the anterior or front view, and here's the posterior view over on the right. The thyroid cartilage is your Adam's apple. It's made of hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage, the most common kind of cartilage that we have. And no cartilage has a vascular system. As a tissue, cartilages are avascular. Underneath that, you could possibly feel your own cricoid cartilage. Kind of obvious on the front, but turn it around and look how big it gets. Okay, this is the cricoid cartilage on the posterior side. Below, we have the cartilaginous C-rings. All of these things have been made of hyaline cartilage. Okay. The arytenoid cartilage is here and here, anchored to the vocal folds and change our pitch or sound that we make. Hyaline cartilage also. And the epiglottis. The epiglottis is the odd one out. It's formed of elastic cartilage. Notice on the posterior side of the thyroid, which does extend all the way around, it's just been removed from the other side. But notice the two parathyroids, just these little tiny dots. There it is. Thyroid, parathyroid. Total of 4 parathyroids because there's going to be 2 on the missing side. This is transverse colon. And this is one of the 3 longitudinal bands of smooth muscle called the tineae coli. One band is here. The second band is here, in between the colon and the serous membrane called the mesocolon. The third band is on the other side underneath. We can't see it. But those 3 bands, with their odd method of contraction, in other words, sequentially, not all at the same time, they cause this puckering into pouches that we call haustra. The singular is a haustrum. In the female reproductive system, there's so many different models. Every one of them is different. But if you have the concept down, the model won't fool you. This is the ovary. This is the os fimbriae. The os fimbriae draws the released ovum into itself and into the oviduct. If it misses its chance to catch, like an outfielder misses the ball, that ovum can instead go out to the abdominal pelvic cavity, where it will probably do nothing at all except be reabsorbed. The worst thing that can happen, unfortunately, though, is that it can get fertilized right about here. Fertilization normally takes place midway along the oviduct, with the spermatozoa coming up and the ova going the other way. If fertilization occurs and for some reason this ovum now fertilized and essentially uh, uh, an embryo, it can, if it gets through, then it can latch onto the wall of the uterus, which is going to be close by, or it can latch onto the abdominal wall and begin development. That would lead to death of the mother. And in times long gone, uh, death of the child too, in many cases. I sometimes think about what it must have been like to be without some medicine or knowledge back in, say, the year 1400 or something. You know, you don't even know you have an atopic pregnancy. And then when you, I'm going to end the conversation. I don't like to think about it. Okay. Here's the uterus. It has rugae at its distal end. And then here's the vagina, and it has rugae also. We have better shots of this one, but for right now, this is the location of the prostate gland in the male. It's directly underneath the bladder. Here's the prostate gland. Okay, I'm not going to say anything more about it here until we get to a better picture. Another model of the same thing that we just saw: ovary, os fimbriae, and the os fimbriae, in case you're wondering, is also known as the infundibulum. Okay? But os fimbriae is the term that I will use on our test. And then here's the oviduct, and this time it's not labeled. Here's the placement of the adrenal gland. All of these glands are made up of glandular epithelium. Okay. Easy point to remember, but if it's so easy, you can almost skip over it. The only gland that we have that isn't made of glandular epithelium is the posterior pituitary, or the neurohypophysis. It's made up of nervous tissue. Same model, but different magnification. Here's the ureter with transitional epithelium lining the lumen of this tube. And here's the bladder. A little bit nicer picture than the one we had earlier, but again, just shows the kidney, and here the ureter. If this is the kidney and this is the ureter, where's the bladder? I know you're not going to answer me because you're not there, but this big thing is the bladder. Who's ever got their hand on this cat is holding it by the bladder. This is just fat. There's always fat around the bladder. Here's the baby model. We all call it that. And here's the thymus again that I mentioned a moment ago. Okay? Thymus producing immunity, setting up the immune system essentially. A moment ago, I said the same thing, but I said helps with the maturation of T cells to fight pathogens and other diseases. Coming down, this is the spleen over here. The spleen, yes, it does store some blood, but the main thing is that it breaks down red blood cells as well. It destroys them. Red blood cells expected to last 120 days and be replaced constantly. And this is the thing that destroys them. You can see the diaphragm in here, just for reference. Here's some liver. This is the greater omentum. Same picture, but now pointing to this serous membrane that interconnects the parts of the small intestine. This is the mesenteries proper. These models are of the kidney, but you only have a small piece of kidney here. These are the arcuate artery and vein, and they mark the distinction between the medulla down here and the cortex up here. All these yellow rounded dots are glomeruli. This one's been magnified. The glomeruli are all located in the renal cortex. When blood is brought into the glomerulus, it's under pressure and plasma is squeezed out. It moves along the proximal convoluted tubule, the descending loop of Henle, the loop, and the ascending loop of Henle, which is what this arrow is pointing at and wants to know. I think we have one more of those. I'll continue with this one. Here's the ascending loop of Henle. The plasma, as it moves forward, is having a higher concentration of crap. By that I mean nitrates and nitrogen wastes. Whereas good material, some protein, some water especially, is reabsorbed by the vasa recta. The plasma moves upward here into the distal convoluted tubule, and that empties into this structure, which is shared by other nephrons and is the collecting duct. This is a nice model of the kidney, but I'm pointing out these guys here. Okay, here's the arcuate artery. The vein, if you want to see it, is over here. It actually, of course, goes all the way around too. But from the arcuate artery, you have these radiating vessels into the cortex. And appropriately, they're called cortico-radiate arteries. They're also known as interlobular arteries. Why they have to keep changing the name, I don't know. Cortico-radiate has only been around about 10 years, but it's so precise in what it's saying, and it's so descriptive that everybody's using it now. So cortical radiate here, the blood's going out, and where are all the glomeruli? They're there, they're just not drawn in. And the blood's going to go there. This is pointing out the greater omentum again. This is liver, spleen, a slice off of the stomach. Most people wouldn't grab that. Here's the gallbladder. The passageway in or out of the gallbladder is the cystic duct. the passageway out of the liver for bile is the hepatic duct. The hepatic and the cystic duct join to form the common bile duct, which terminates at the pointer here at the ampulla of Vater, which can enlarge and blow up like a small bubble, and it can act as a reservoir for some bile. The bile going to be used to emulsify fat. But as more and more bile is produced and nobody's eating mayonnaise, okay, then you may not have any use for the bile. But you can't have it. You can't explode. You can't just keep making it. So you back up and inflate the gallbladder, back up towards the liver, which is making more, so you're not getting far going towards the liver. And pretty soon you have completely filled the system. So you got to have a release. And the release is the sphincter of Oddi, a small sphincter muscle at the very distal end of the ampulla of Vater, which will allow drippage, seepage, and get rid of excess bile. The bile is useful, but if you don't have a use for it, it's no good. I mean, I got a toolbox, and all of those tools are useful, but I hate to get it out. Okay. Here's the skin. The epidermis, they start off, I think that might be pink, I'm not sure, to show you the stratum corneum that layers. But we have 5 layers of epidermis, and they go from here down to here. That's the epidermis. So you got a lot of skin, but you don't really have much epidermis. The epidermis has no vascular system. The living cells are in the first layer, the stratum basale, which is down here. And they are close to blood vessels, close enough that by osmosis and diffusion, they can get the necessities they need to divide. Okay. Below the epidermis, in I believe again pink, all the way down to here. This is the dermis. This is dense, irregular, connective tissue. I'm wondering if I just deafened you. I just realized I was crunching ice, and that may come across. Sorry. Okay, hair follicle here, hair follicle there. This is a sebaceous gland. Here's a sebaceous gland that's cut. Sebaceous gland secretes oil. We call it sebum. Okay. Sebaceous glands are holocrine glands because they also secrete entire cells. This is a sweat gland, best called a sudoriferous gland. There's another one over here, and there's one over here that's been sliced so that you can see the tubules as they go upwards. The sweat gland secretes just sweat. That's pretty easy. But the sweat is all liquid. And since this only produces fluids, this is a merocrine gland. Merocrine gland. Sebaceous glands and sudoriferous glands are, of course, exocrine glands because they do have ducts, as we can see. The purpose of a duct is to deliver the secretion to a specific location. In endocrine glands, the hormone is delivered to the entire body. Here's the pharyngeal tonsil, We call it the adenoid. While we're at it, here's the palatine tonsil. This guy, this board, half of it is so schematic, and the other half is kind of artistic, but we take what we get. This is kidney, once again. This is a glomerulus. That's a good place to start. And the glomerulus then would be in the cortex. Here's the arcuate vein and arcuate artery running at about 90 degrees. And so down here would be the renal medulla. Here's a cortical radiate artery. See, it's coming off of the arcuate. Cortical radiate. This is the afferent arteriole. Afferent going towards the glomerulus. The blood that survives being in the glomerulus comes out through the efferent arteriole. The blood is under pressure. Plasma is expressed. Expressed is the word for squeezing liquid out, like out of a sponge. Okay. That plasma goes through the proximal convoluted tubule. The descending loop of Henle, ascending loop of Henle, and then now the distal convoluted tubule and into the collecting duct, which is on its way to a minor calyx. The efferent arteriole spans out across the loop of Henle, picking up or reabsorbing material that the body wants to keep. And then it will take it back out through this vein. It's called the vena recta, by the way, but you don't need to know it. Go here to the interlobular vein or the cortical radiate vein, to the arcuate vein, and into the lobar vein. This last slide's a simple one. This is smooth muscle. It is the stomach, after all. The internal organs only have smooth muscle. It does show the rugae pretty well, here and here. And this, unlabeled, is the pyloric sphincter. Let's get that in proportion again. Sorry for right now. I have to hunt and peck myself for something. Just bear with me. I know I could pause the recording, but don't need to take a chance with that. Okay. The respiratory system lecture. Few questions are on L3. Okay. So I misspoke. This is in week 7. Week 7. Okay, I'm only going to go down this one more time. Sometimes I think Canvas just eats stuff up. Well, I'm going to use it from here, from Charlie's website. When the window doesn't open up for you, click the title. I'm coming down to Unit 4, and I'm going to go to Histology Slides. I can mention this again tomorrow. And these are the slides that we had gone over. And while I was talking, I realized I did go over them yesterday. So I need to do them with you. Not the whole bunch. Don't worry. Don't turn off just yet. We've done the epithelial. We've done all the connective. We've done the muscle. We've done the nervous. All I want to do is show you these organs right here. Okay. And starting with the salivary gland. This is not a good picture. We have better pictures. And if you were with us on the other day, you saw great pictures of salivary gland. If you weren't, you are really encouraged to look at the recording for any day that you missed. But if you missed yesterday, definitely need that recording. This is a salivary gland, a lot of fat in it, a lot of ducts in it, and not very recognizable. It's like there's no sign saying this is a salivary gland. These are acinar cells. We heard that term before. They produce enzymes. This we had it in the pancreas. These produce salivary amylase. I always tell people if you can't recognize it, think, could it be a salivary gland? And half the time it's a salivary gland and it just pops right into your mind. But we have good pictures of that in the second half of this lecture. And the second half is posted separately from this one. Part one, that's this one, and part two. The tongue, be sure you can recognize the tongue, has stratified squamous epithelium on the top, nice protective thick layer, but it has these taste buds. Okay. So from their point of view, you need to say taste bud. I skipped esophagus because I know I'm not going to use it, and it's not a great picture. This is the stomach. You have to get your orientation. First off, down here, this is all smooth muscle. If that's the case, the lumen must be towards this side. And right here is the lumen. We don't expect, and it's wrong of us, but we don't expect the lumen to be shown so thin. Okay, there's a lot more lumen. My God, this is just the edge of the epithelium. This is epithelial cells that line the stomach. And since the stomach is part of the GI tract, except for the upper esophagus, the entire GI tract is lined by simple columnar epithelium. We don't even have to magnify it if we know it's stomach. Okay. These are not villi going upward. Instead, there are slices going downward called gastric pits. It has the same effect. It makes it look like you've got bristles going upward. In the stomach, the epithelium is rather smooth across the top. And that's not the case in the small intestine, which we'll see next. We've used this slide a lot. Here are the fingers of the small intestine, intestinal wall. They're called villi. The microvilli are on the outside here. The microvilli are simple columnar epithelium. The small intestine is the major organ of digestion and absorption. This is a great picture of the colon. Okay. You can see here also, since it is part of the GI tract, The cells on the lining side are simple columnar. These clear areas are called goblet cells. They secrete mucus and help the contents move along. We can find goblet cells in the stomach. We can find more in the small intestine, and we find them most in the colon itself. Colon's function, I don't know all the functions, to uh, reabsorb water and compaction of waste. This colon slide always reminds me of some sort of tentacled monster coming after me. Okay, it looks like a octopus leg there, okay, but more than the normal amount of tentacles. The pancreas, we already looked at a pancreas. I did that for you a moment ago. Here's an islet of Langerhans. This little one is an islet of Langerhans. They are the same size. Well, then why don't they look the same size? Because this one's pushed down deeper than this one. And when you made the cut, or when somebody made the cut, it's the luck of the draw. As do you get through the center, the widest part, or do you just nick the edge of an islet? Remember that these are acinar cells around it, and that they don't produce hormone; they produce pancreatic amylase. The liver. If you've ever seen sand dollars, although they're very much becoming rare in Southern California, they used to be all over the place. My sister went to Seaside, Oregon the other day, and she writes that I got 80 sand dollars. And I said, that's why they're getting rare, because she picked up 80 of them to dry out, I suppose. Okay, well, these look like tiles, but in the center of each tile is a central vein. Coming up at the corners or where the tiles meet, there's usually 6 spots. Those are called triads because they have 3 components. They have a bile duct, they have a part of the hepatic portal system, and they have a hepatic artery or arteriole. Don't try to memorize that from what I just said. I have another good model of that for you in part 2. Okay. You need to know some functions of the liver, maintenance of homeostasis. It also helps destroy many of the red blood cells. Detoxification of the blood is also important, and probably the most important thing. The kidney, I'm not going to open it because I'll open it. It's the same thing we've had before. A glomerulus inside, glomerular space, Bowman's capsule, just so tiny and thin all the way around. Kidney tubules here, need to know they're made of simple cuboidal epithelium. Bowman's capsule from simple squamous epithelium. The eye never gives anybody any trouble when I show the right diagram. I am not going to use the left diagram. Okay. The part that confuses some people, but then they go, oh yeah, is that this is a lens. This is the top of the lens itself. This is the ciliary muscle or ciliary body, same thing. And we don't get to see the attachment. So I won't use that. I would use this. When you see the eye and you see the layers, look for the dark part. That's the choroid cone. It's the part that absorbs excess light. Then the side that looks like mowed grass. Okay. And that is the retina. This is the posterior cavity, leaving only this out here, this whole thick area, protective area, to be the sclera. The lung always looks sort of spongy, has a lot of air spaces inside of it, which we'd expect. It also has some simple squamous epithelium where, look right here, single layer flat, single layer flat. Not all of them are. Look at that, that's thicker. Okay, maybe there's 2 layers there. Can't tell from the picture, but simple squamous is found here. An alveolus would be a small indentation like right here or here, but this whole piece would be could be either a terminal bronchiole or a respiratory bronchiole or an alveolar sac. Possibly the best guess would be to call this an alveolar sac and this an alveolus. Why is it a guess for us? Because we don't know at what layer or what level the tissue is actually cut. Okay. I will never ask you a trick question. Okay, I will ask you, what's this area of the organ where external respiration occurs? Now, the trick here is external respiration that occurs in the lungs. Internal respiration occurs in the tissues again. We already saw a model of the skin, epidermis, all the dark area on the right, and dermis below. Okay. Keep saying to yourself as you look at any slide, uh, what kind of tissue it is. Dermis, dense irregular connective tissue. Epidermis, stratified squamous. Here's a sebaceous gland. Here, here. We're seeing these, but we're not seeing the surface. That's okay. These are sebaceous glands. They sort of look like potatoes with bugs on them. These sets of tubules that gather together or close together, those are pseudoriferous or sweat glands. Yes, the models always make them look round, but they're not. We also have adipose in here. We can expect to see adipose in any slide. This is a cat ovary, but what's needed to be pointed out is the ovum itself, the follicle, and that's it. There's nothing else. This is a future mature follicle. It's not developed yet. And the testes slide has traditionally been difficult for people. I don't see why. And ever since I started telling people that this is going to be so tough, they end up getting it. I don't know if it's a challenge or they don't want to lose the point. Okay. All you're looking at here are seminiferous tubules. Okay. The tubule, I can't say it. The tubular lining, like right here, is producing spermatids towards the lumen. They're all producing spermatids. They're all filling up the lumen. It's got to go someplace, so it goes to the epididymis for storage. And either it is released, or if that doesn't happen, the spermatids in the fluid are reabsorbed into the body. These are all interconnected. This is a continuous hose or tubule, if you will. You just don't get to see all of the parts because they raise up or they go away from us. They don't stay in the plane of the picture. Okay. I think this will probably be ready in an hour or so for me to process, and then take another hour to do that and get it up. But definitely it should be up before class tomorrow. Okay. This is going to be put with yesterday's date, which would have been 5/4, and that's going to be recording part 2. Okay. No, I'm sorry. Re recording part 1. Part 1. I've already got 2. Okay. So this goes on. You'll notice there's a lot of material, uh, but it also repeats, repeats, repeats. And as long as you can handle that, you're going to do really well. Okay. Uh, I don't suggest that you rely only on the recordings. About 10 people are relying only on recordings if they're doing that. I don't know. I can't tell, but I can tell they're not attending the Zoom talks. They're not asking any questions. They're not getting any of the answers because I do the question and answers without recording. So take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. You don't want to weaken your score at the last minute here. I want and hope that you each get the highest grade you can. Okay, then